Thank you, Jennifer Preston. Thank you to the Knight Foundation for having me. This is the first time I've been at the Knight Media Forum. As Lilly mentioned, I direct a national journalism and media program. MacArthur has been in the media space for about 40 years, but it wasn't until June of last year did we start doing local work, which is why we're here today. So we were asked by our president a few years ago to ground the program in Chicago, which is where we're based. And remarkably, we had done very little journalism and media work in Chicago, so we were newbies to the space. And we thought, you know, what is the contribution that MacArthur can make in a city like Chicago, where it isn't a news desert? It's a place with lots of good and great commercial and non-commercial news outlets, from television to public media to nonprofits. It's a place with several journalism schools. It's a place with a very robust and good ethnic media landscape. So what can we do in Chicago that would make a meaningful contribution, given that we had, in our world, modest funds to work with? So financial and business model situations aside, we thought there's no shortage of reporting. So what do we want to do in Chicago? And so we decided that the problem that we thought was really important for us in our local context was the ways in which that reporting replicated, reinforced, and exacerbated the racial and economic segregation that we face in the city. That is a major problem in our city, as I know it is in other major cities. It is the source or how our concentration of power plays out, how people in Chicago, depending on where they live, experience very different lived experiences. It affects whether you have good schools in your neighborhood or whether you don't. It affects whether you feel like you have agency and control over your choices and livelihood. So we wanted to tackle that segregation issue, and we felt like there was a part of journalism in Chicago that was really contributing to it, instead of solving for it or addressing it, contributing to it. So we wanted to find, excuse me, we wanted to find organizations, news outlets in Chicago that we thought were doing one of three things, or all three things. Organizations that were addressing the misrepresentation and underrepresentation of certain communities in Chicago. News organizations that were explicitly connecting journalism to civic engagement and civic action and civic agency. And news organizations that were building bridges between unlike news organizations. A lot of folks are talking about collaboration in the news space. We see a lot of collaboration on the national scale, which is terrific. But we wanted to see unlike news outlets collaborating. And we wanted to put the funding and the power dynamic in the organization that might be smaller, that might be the one in the community. So with this guide or these criteria in mind, it led us to three organizations in Chicago as our, what we call our inaugural set of grantees. One is City Bureau, and Darryl will tell you about that. The other is Free Spirit Media, which is an organization that trains and develops young people to tell their own stories in the west and south sides of Chicago. And the other is WBEZ, which is our public radio station. But within WBEZ, we decided to support Vocalo, which is led by a Latina, and it's their sort of sister station, alternative station. And also, coincidentally, WBEZ was starting a race, class, and communities desk staffed by all people of color. So we wanted to put our resources into that. So those were our three inaugural grants that we announced last June. In addition, we went through a very expansive process, because we have to recognize that as funders, we know who we know, and we tend to give credibility or assign credibility and authority to organizations or people like us. And we realized that something about our process and our institution created a wall that we weren't getting to other folks. There were some folks who were able to pick the phone and call us, call our president, call me, people who felt agency and empowered to email us and say, oh, you're starting a journalism program. I'd like to have a piece of that. But we had a bunch of people who weren't calling us, who didn't know us, who couldn't make that phone call, who couldn't email us directly, and it was our job to go out and find them. And so we also realized that we couldn't do that ourselves, that we needed help. So we worked with the Field Foundation of Illinois, Angelique Power, and Angelique and we contracted with Susan Smith Richardson, and they did many, many meetings with over 70 individuals that run news organizations and community organizations of various sizes all across the city to get at what are the news and information needs of communities, how can journalism organizations that are not the ones that are known to us, what are they doing, how can they be better served and supported? So just a few weeks ago, we announced a $3 million investment in the Field Foundation, and they will turn around and support many more news organizations that are like the kinds of organizations that we funded directly, like City Bureau. So I'm going to turn over to Darryl to say a little bit more about City Bureau.
Sure thing. So from our perspective, Kathy, Lauren, and Jen made an investment in our shared beliefs. For us, that was an endorsement of this new set of values that City Bureau is bringing to the news industry. That is built on diversity, equity, and inclusion, not as lip service, because I think it can be easy to say DEI, just those 3 letters, and not as head counting, because that's not a great metric for sustainability. We are interested in diversity, equity, and inclusion that is baked into our processes and into our policies. And we appreciate working with the foundation that is really working to develop leadership that embodies the sort of diversity, equity, and inclusion that we also support in our newsroom. And the last point I'll make, and I'll try and be quick, is that personally, I think our relationship with MacArthur is built on a commitment to equip, inform, and engage the communities that we serve in Chicago. Journalism is good at informing. It is getting a lot better at engaging, but there's a lot of work to do in terms of equipping. But we see that as the antidote to elitist, top-down reporting. So that's why we're here. You probably heard in other panels about our programs. I won't go too deeply into them, but when we talk about democratizing journalism and democratizing journalism skills through our public newsroom, through our civic reporting fellowship, through our documentaries program, that is what we're talking about. We are here to equip as many folks as we can in Chicago and beyond with the skills they need that are journalistic in nature to do the work that we do and in collaboration with us. So we are looking to reimagine local journalism, and MacArthur has helped us expand that vision.
Great. Philadelphia, you're next, and so between the two of you, 5 minutes. We have a big panel, so thank you.
I yield my time.
Okay. Good morning. Thanks to the Knight Foundation for having me, for having us. My name is Jean Friedman-Rudovsky. I'm the co-executive director of Resolve Philadelphia, a relatively new organization. As Lilly said, we develop and advance journalism built on equity, collaboration, and the elevation of community voices and solutions. So our flagship work, which is supported by the Lenfest Institute, is called Broke in Philly. It is a collaboration amongst more than 20 news organizations and 2 academic institutions in Philadelphia, looking at solutions to poverty and economic mobility in our city. Philadelphia is the poorest of the 10 biggest cities in the United States. And this group of newsrooms includes everyone from NBC 10 and Telemundo to The Inquirer, WHYY, to digital first outlets such as Billy Penn, ethnic media, Word Radio, which is Black Talk Media, one of the only independently owned Black radio stations in the country, to Philatinos Radio, which is manned by one person, an online streaming service serving the Mexican community in South Philly. So really a wide-ranging group of partners who have all agreed to come together for, it's already been going almost a year and will be going a lot longer, to really do dedicated, sustained, solutions-oriented, and engaged journalism on a topic that is central to our city. this is sort of the second iteration of this model. We did something called the Reentry Project, thanks to a grant from the Knight Foundation, which was a project of the Solutions Journalism Network in 2017. And that was the same model of sort of collaborative, solutions-oriented, engaged journalism. It was 13 newsrooms looking at the challenges of and solutions to prisoner reentry in Philadelphia. We produced over 200 stories, did a number of community engagement events, and it was sort of so successful that I think led Lenfest to really want to invest in us in a second year and for the long term. And so when it comes to this partnership, I'll let Jim talk a little bit about his decision to want to invest in Resolve. But from our perspective, Lenfest has been our core funder with financial support, which has been incredibly important. But I think in addition to that, Jim and the entire Lenfest team has tried to figure out ways to support our work above and beyond just giving money. So, an example, the Reentry Project did not include a commercial television station. I had approached a lot of them. They all said, thanks, but no thanks. And for the second year, when we were planning Broke, Jim said, hey, you know what? I have a good relationship with the folks at NBC. How about I set up a meeting? We can try to bring them on board. We had that meeting. It was successful. And that's just sort of an example of he and the entire team looking for ways to plug into our work and to be supportive above and beyond just giving a financial commitment.
Thank you, and I'll be very brief. A minute and 51 seconds, actually. It's a great use of digital media. I wanted to thank two of the other funders involved with this project, the Knight Foundation, first and foremost, and Wincoat, who's represented here by Feather Houston and David Haas. And I wanted to thank Jennifer Preston in particular and Alberto for their deep and very early commitment to the Lenfest Institute and to the city of Philadelphia. I'm going to talk very quickly about what drew us to this project and why we find it successful and why we intend to invest long term, which I think is itself a lesson in the building of these relationships, a long-term commitment. The first was, as Jean said, there was significant proof of concept. We saw this ecosystem of news entities and universities working together actively with great impact on the Reentry Project. That led to Broke in Philly, which we thought would be successful based upon that track record. The second was we made an early decision that the Lenfest mission was to help support and frankly save local journalism in the city of Philadelphia and cities like Philadelphia, not only the Philadelphia Inquirer, which we own and consider the flagship. We thought that this ecosystem approach that was really embodied by Jean and her team was fundamental to that mission. So we're joined at the hip, and we thought that was very supportable. We also thought that it was replicable, and we were proved right in that there are now a dozen cities that have asked for Jean's help and the team's help to create, in effect, a Resolve Philadelphia of their city, taking on the biggest issues of that city through the power of journalism and civic engagement. We thought that was very, very supportable. Thank you.
Detroit.
Detroit is a really exciting place to be, and it's also exciting what's happening in community and engagement in local news. In fact, I think many of you today have felt that Detroit is taking over this event. How many are here from Detroit? I needed to recognize, I think there are 30 or 40 of us here, so it's a real indication of the depth of what's happening. Most of what has been funded so far is Ford, Knight, and the Community Foundation. We always welcome other funders, so all of you, I hope you come visit Detroit. I'm going to talk about three things real quickly. The Detroit Journalism Cooperative, which was actually started by the Knight Foundation during the Detroit bankruptcy. Many of us were really, really concerned about how those in communities were going to learn what was going to happen in their lives. And that a whole cooperative came together. There's 6 major members of the cooperative: Public Television, Public Radio, Center for Michigan, Chalk Beat Detroit, and New Michigan Media. That cooperative is very much alive and well. The second piece is the Detroit Engagement Fund. This is a fund which is administered by the Community Foundation, but funded by Knight and Ford and ourselves. And it's really to fund collaboration among and between the cooperative members and many new startup, very diverse kinds of information media outlets. We are now in a second round of funding, and I think we will continue to support this kind of experimentation in neighborhoods. And the third piece is a series of forums to really stir the pot, bring the issues to the broader community. And so we are holding major events. We kicked it off with Amy Webb, so everyone left really depressed, but it got their interest. So we focus on basically talent, cooperation, and innovation. That's talent, cooperation, and innovation. That's very much alive. And I think you will find that it's a little messy, but the experiments, I think, will play out in the future. And so with that, I'm going to turn to John, who's been with us from day one in this effort.
And I hope to be with you a lot longer. Detroit is traditionally, historically, a city of silos. 3 gigantic global auto companies beating each other's brains in every day. And many other parts of Detroit culture, its numerous political subdivisions and its media culture have also traditionally beat each other's brains in every day. The Detroit media culture, until the past decade, has been one of get the exclusive, beat the other people. And so imagine our delight, surprise, and confusion when the Knight Foundation pulled a number of us together almost 6 years ago now and said, we would like to fund you to cooperate and break down your silos. And I will acknowledge, I think a lot of my colleagues from Detroit will too, we've made a lot of mistakes. Boy, are we bruised, and have we screwed some things up over the past 6 years. But we've also had some amazing successes. And one of the things I feel like we're coming to grips with and learning is we are much stronger together than we are as individual media enterprises. Last year we had an election for governor in Michigan, and the collaborative was able to attract every candidate for governor to sit down for a 1-hour interview, which in the Twitter and YouTube age is almost unheard of. When some of our traditional media friends were competing for that debate that they could sell advertising space around, we were able to sit down in the Arab American News and WDET and DPTV and Bridge, which is the center's publication. We were able to have a very diverse group of journalists engage with those candidates one by one. And more importantly, the collaboration's going on between the reporters, not the managers or something that is scripted in a grant proposal or a grant report. The frontline collaborations that the frontline journalists are doing is the magic that's beginning to unfold. The challenge going forward, and I'd like to thank our friends in Philadelphia, the challenge going forward is how do we create a system here that is sustainable to where we're not just sharing great ideas, but we're sharing revenues, and we're sharing earned revenue ways of building going forward. And the Resolve Philly project, the reentry project playbook, has been an instrumental guide for us, and we're very grateful to you for that.
Great. Thank you. John.
Well, thank you. I'm going to try to be utterly unoriginal here because I find that I'm better in these situations when I lean on the words people that are smarter than I am. But before I do that, and Robin wisely admonished us against using slides that were sort of busy and not very understandable. I do have a slide that I think is pretty understandable. This is Andre Green Epstein, 1 month old yesterday. Andre's dad is Dave Epstein, who's a terrific journalist, best-selling author, elite athlete, handsome, generous guy. Mom is Elizabeth Green, who a number of you know as great journalist, founder of Chalkbeat, General Force of Nature, and my co-founder in the American Journalism Project. Andre is named because Elizabeth and Dave were reading War and Peace on the beach when he was conceived. So, in other words, these are people who, if they were not so terribly delightful, would be really easy to hate. And so I told Andre's parents that if he had behavioral issues, it was, given that he hit the genetic lottery, it was clearly due to bad parenting, so no pressure. I put Andre on the screen for two reasons. One, Elizabeth sends her regrets, and this is immediately explainable as to why she's not here. And the second, to lean on a friend, Tony Marks, who is the CEO of New York Public Libraries and was co-chair of the Knight Commission, told a story the other day about a picture of Ben Franklin that he has in his office and the conversation that he's been having with Ben over the last few months. And the maybe apocryphal quote from Franklin coming out of the Constitutional Commission when someone said, "What kind of government are you going to have?" And he said, "A republic, if you can keep it." And what Tony said was that he's never, except for the last couple of years, doubted the keepability of that republic. And I think about this kid, and I, like Tony, am worried about being able to tell this kid that when he's my age, I'm 53, that the republic is keepable. And so the American Journalism Project, and I've stopped worrying about being melodramatic about this stuff because I believe it this deeply. It's just our best idea to make sure we've got a republic when this kid is my age. That's how I've begun to think about it. Most of you by now have heard kind of the tactics of what we're up to. We have raised $42 million against a notionally $50 million first fund target, but that really is a drop in the bucket. We're just getting started. The grant agreement we signed with the Knight Foundation called out $100 million total project size, and even that really is just getting started. We've three core beliefs. One, the interdependence of democracy and journalism. Second is the market failure in local journalism, and the third is that failure is something that must be solved by us, not by government, not by commerce, and that we need to think of our local news institutions as fundamentally civic rather than commercial in nature, and that will require a huge shifting, as my friend Amy Lowe at Emerson says, in the norms in this country. And so to continue to lean on Amy, we were having a conversation this morning. So that's about the money. We as we said, it's just getting started. We think we're $1 billion a year shy of what needs to be reinjected into local news gathering spend. So we're about capital formation and trying to get the money to start to come into the sector. But as Amy says, and she was telling me a story from her time at the Gates Foundation, when Patty Stonecipher said, we got two assets at the Gates Foundation, our money and our voice. And the money, which at the time was $30-odd billion, I guess it's now $50-odd billion, the money's nothing compared to the voice. And so I'd say the same thing here. We, all of us, have to develop a voice, and this is the last person I'm going to lean on. That voice has to say what Alberto said yesterday, which is, this is a we the people problem. This is on us to solve. We believe that the first step on that road is an AJP Fund 1 that goes towards $1 billion of incremental news gathering spend, but importantly, that increases the size of the journalism philanthropy market, if you will, by an order of magnitude in the United States as quickly as possible. And so I'm just so grateful to all of you, but particularly to the group of funders that's taken a pretty bold leap in an organization that's awfully young. So thank you.